It happened a few days ago. Me and my family went to a vacation house owned by my uncle. I had a great time there since I got to spend some time playing with my siblings in the clubhouse. One day we decided to visit the local mall, which was about 15 minutes away from where we live. My uncle's family went in another car, and we went in our own. We didn't exactly know where the mall was, so my sister sent us the location, and we followed that. Suddenly, our car stopped in the middle of the road. Fortunately, nothing bad happened, and we somehow managed to park our car beside the road. I called my sister, who was in my uncle's car. They said they had been pulled over by the cops because their car was a four-seater and there were 6 people sitting in the car. After about 30 minutes, my dad found a mechanic and our car started working again. We were now going to the mall, but suddenly our GPS stopped working. Keep in mind that my sister's GPS stopped working too. We then figured out that by the time we would reach there, the mall would have already been closed. Anyway, we headed back to our home and played pool in the clubhouse. The next morning, we were all shocked to know that the mall was burnt to a crisp when we were supposed to be there. There were around 50 people dead. To this day, I think what would have happened if our car didn't stop where it did, or if the GPS hadn't stopped working. It still gives me chills. My name is Kevin, and this happened to me last month. I was camping with 2 of my friends. We booked a spot at a large campsite in a forest that's right next to a lake and a beach. On the second night of our trip, I woke up from my sleep to use the bathroom. The bathrooms were located in their own individual building, and to get there, you have to walk down a dirt road through the forest. While I was walking to the washrooms, I felt like I was being watched. Luckily, I made it to the bathroom safely. But on my way back, I started to hear fast footsteps behind me. I turned around, and following right behind me was a scarily tall, human-like figure. The only thing I could see other than its silhouette were its beaming orange eyes. I immediately started to run as fast as I could, while the figure ran behind me. I cut through some trees and bushes and hid so that it lost my tracks. I eventually made it to my tent, but I decided to quickly peek out to see if the creature was gone. To my surprise, I saw the tall figure walk to the lake's beach and start digging a hole in the sand. It then sprinted off into the forest. My friends didn't believe me when I told them, but I know what I saw was true, and I will definitely never be heading back to that campsite ever again. I wanted to share my horror story experience with you. I cannot tell you my name because of privacy issues. You can just call me Maybeth. I'm 13 years old and this incident happened to me recently. I had gone to live with my grandmother for summer vacation. My grandmother lives on the city side in a big house in which my 9-year-old cousin John also lives. My cousin has a habit of teasing me. It was nighttime and I was sleeping in my room. It was 2 a.m. In my room, there's a big window that faces the outside of the house, in which I could see the garden and a lot of trees. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of somebody tapping on my window. It was dark in the room. When I looked around the room from the window, I saw my cousin hanging from the tree outside the window. He was knocking on the window like a psychopath, and he had that creepy smile on his face. I knew that he was not my cousin, but whoever it was, I wasn't going to find out. I quickly ran away from the window while screaming at the top of my lungs. My grandma came and asked me what had happened. I told her all about it, and she said, "You should not worry too much. It is normal for me. I even saw you." I was so confused. I asked Grandma, "What does it mean?" Then what she said next will always remain in my memory. "There's a ghost that lives in this town. It can shift into anybody's face." I was so scared after what she told me that the next day, I went back to my house.
For context, I'm a 21-year-old athletic woman and I'm 5'7". This incident happened a couple weeks ago and I still remember it like yesterday. I was a local jogger that would casually say good morning to neighbors and strangers. I also lived alone and single as my ex-boyfriend left me for a taller girl, but I'm not here to talk about that. It was a Thursday evening. I put on my jogging clothes and timing bracelet as I left my house and began jogging. A few of my neighbors had gone back inside while others still had some duties like gardening. As I was looking at my bracelet, I looked back up and nearly bumped into an overweight middle-aged towering woman who was just standing in the middle of the sidewalk. I came to a halt and apologized to her, but I noticed that she was looking directly at the ground. She said nothing at all and didn't even care to look at me once. I walked around her and continued jogging, but there was something about her that wasn't okay at all. I quickly looked back, and now her head was pointing at my direction. I could see her bloodshot eyes through her long, messy hair. It gave me goosebumps, and I just looked away. When I got home, I forgot about her, and since the jog made me sweaty, I decided to take a nice hot shower. Afterwards, I put some clothes on and watched a movie on Netflix in the living room. I sat on my sofa that was behind a large window that didn't have curtains at the time. You'll see why I mentioned this. During the middle of the movie, I started to notice something on the TV. It looked like a reflection almost. Curious, I paused the movie and got up from the sofa to look closely. That's when I realized it was indeed a reflection of someone's face. I looked back and my eyes widened as I saw the same woman I almost bumped into. She had her tongue and chest pressed against the glass whilst giving me this perverted smile. Then she starts to bang the window with her right fist. I immediately grabbed my phone off the table as I ran upstairs to the bathroom, and locking the door, I laid down in my empty bathtub as I called the cops. Then I heard the window glass breaking, a sound that will be forever burned into my head. I could hear her footsteps climbing the stairs as I prayed to myself that the cops come here ASAP. As soon as the woman reaches the bathroom door, the sound of a man shouting "police" and woman getting tasered were sudden, but a relief at the same time. I waited until it was safe for me to go out. A police officer walked up to me and thanked me as he told me that they were looking for this woman for 2 weeks. He then explained that she was an escaped prisoner who was convicted for molesting her 15-year-old daughter. The scariest part about this was how ninja silent she was. I blamed the volume on the TV, but she managed to follow me back home without me noticing is strange. I didn't even have headphones on. A couple weeks later, I had to move out because I'd gotten a job somewhere else, and the police haven't given me an update yet. I also hope that vile woman rots in her cell for what she's done.
It gives me the chills to think about an incident that happened when I was 13. I still remember it, even to this day. So here's the story. One day at school, my friends decided to play Ding Dong Ditch. Let's call them Anthony, Ed, David, and Josh. So once we planned everything, we went out around 6 p.m. and started deciding which house we should do. There was this one house that was creepy looking, and I heard rumors that a crazy man was living at that place. So being dumb kids, we decided to see if the rumors were true. Being the fastest one, I had to knock first. So I did around 3 times and ran. Then I hid behind a bush where Ed was hiding. Jumped when the door swung open and a crazed man looked out the door. I realized that this man wasn't normal. He was screaming and saying, "I'm gonna kill you!" then slammed the door. We were a little terrified, but we decided it was Anthony's turn to knock. I told him to walk slowly, then run to us when he's done. So Anthony knocked, then ran to where we were hiding. A few seconds later, the guy opened the door with something that gave me the chills. A knife and a metal baseball bat. Ed said, "Run!" The guy heard Ed and started chasing us at a terrifying speed. We hid behind a neighbor's house. We stayed there until we felt like he was gone. But this part is something that I can call paralyzation. The guy was right there, but instead of a knife, the man was holding Ed. We screamed, then ran to our houses. My mind was racing. Was Ed going to be okay? I called David and Josh and I asked them if they were home yet, and they said yes. Then they asked me where was Ed. I told them what happened to Ed, and they were in shock. I wish the story ended here, but it doesn't. That day I was getting ready for bed, thinking about what had just happened. While I was laying in bed, there was a thunderstorm. Then, after a few flashes, there was a shadowy figure appearing after each flash of lightning. I turned to look, and there he was, looking at me. And he gave me a bone-chilling grin. To this day, I still haven't told anybody about this incident. Ed went missing, and he's still missing to this day.
Next to my house, there lived a strange man named Tom. Tom never looked people in the eyes. He always stared at their stomachs. So, I have never once made eye contact with him. Whenever Tom saw me, he always repeated the same phrase. It was, "I want a hug." He loved hugging anything. He would often be seen hugging trees or poles when passing by. Once, I saw him getting slapped when he asked a stranger for a hug. It seemed like he had an intense obsession with hugging. One day, while passing by his house, I happened to see through the open front door dozens of mannequins lined up. I was shocked, but I pretended not to notice and greeted Tom. Tom smiled brightly and still stared at my stomach, arms outstretched. After that day, Tom started to give me chills. One day, he met me in front of my house and said to me, "I want to be hugged for 100 hours, but no one will hug me." Suddenly, he asked me to hug him and came towards me with his arms outstretched. I hugged him, feeling uncomfortable. He held on to me for a long time without letting go. I told him to stop hugging me, but he didn't release. Instead, he started squeezing me tightly. I pushed him away angrily, but he didn't even flinch. He shouted, "I love hugging. Don't let go. Never." It was the first time I heard him speak so loudly, and his breathing became heavy, his heart beating rapidly. I used all of my strength to pull away from him and punched him in the face. Then he ran away to his house. I followed him to his house, still angry. Looking through his window, I saw something eerie. Tom was hugging each of the mannequins one by one. Then he kicked one of the mannequins and shouted, "It's not warm enough." A few days later, in the middle of the night, I heard a knock on the door. It was Tom, holding handcuffs. My heart sank and I held my breath. He stood there for over an hour, repeating the same gesture of hugging the air. I called the police, and after a warning, they sent him home. After that day, Tom disappeared and never came out of his house for over a month. I went to his house, but there was no response. And despite several more weeks passing, Tom was nowhere to be seen. Eventually, I went to his house, and an overwhelming stench emanated from it. I eventually called the police, and they found Tom's body buried under dozens of mannequins. Among them, there was one mannequin that looked almost human, with a wig and painted eyes and mouth. Tom was lying down with the mannequin in his arms, and both of Tom's hands that were holding the mannequin were handcuffed. The cause of death was cardiac arrest.
Hello, my name is Sam. The story I'm about to share with you is a true story that happened in my old neighborhood. I was in elementary school with my two sisters. Mary was 13 and the oldest. I was 11 and the middle child, and my little sister Emily was 8. One day at school, I witnessed a little girl being forced into a blue vehicle. She was crying, but the man forced her in was trying to shut her up. That day, we had an indoor recess, and it had something to do with a blue vehicle and a missing student. The teachers locked the school entrance and warned the class to look out for a blue car. Every morning, we would catch the bus at 7:15, and I would always look out for an adventure. So I would always pay attention to everything that happened. One day, we were waiting by the bus stop as usual when I spotted it. Across the street sat a man inside a blue car. He had black hair and sunglasses. His windows were always open and we could see inside the car easily. It looked like he had pink seats and cute puppies with toys. It was strange, especially because he was only staring at us. We were the only people who were at the bus stop, so it wasn't like he was watching his kid or anything. I didn't say anything at first, but then I started seeing him regularly. I pointed him out to my older sister, Mary, joking that he was stalking us and he probably wanted to kidnap someone. We all started laughing, but then, realizing the situation, we got scared. Eventually, the bus came and we all sat in the back. As the bus was moving, I turned around to stare at the window, and to my horror, the blue car was following us. I screamed and informed everyone about the man that was following us. At that point, everyone was crowded at the back, trying to have a glimpse of the man. The bus driver told us to sit down. It was probably nothing, but she looked scared. Realizing he was spotted, the blue car turned at a corner and disappeared. We all calmed down, but 2 minutes later, he showed up again, and we all noticed. After that incident, we stopped seeing the man, but we still experienced weird things. Like one time, my cousin and I were playing in the backyard. We had a gate at the back that opened to the alley and led out to the bus stop. At one point, one of my cousins opened the gate. We began playing tag in the alley when a small white puppy began running towards us. It was very similar to the puppies in the blue car. We fed it some chicken, but as I was feeding it, it tried to bite me. We realized that this puppy was very aggressive and rough. We also noticed that the puppy had a blue mark painted on it. Before, we didn't pay it any mind, but the more I think about it, the more I realized it must have belonged to some sort of gang. My mom told us to stop playing in the alley and stay close. After that, the puppy disappeared. We forgot about the situation until now. Emily told me when the puppy disappeared, she heard a loud whistle and the dog began running to a man dressed in black and who stood on the corner. Was the puppy the same puppy from the blue car? Was he using the puppy as bait to kidnap us? And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we ended up following the puppy towards the man.
My name is Ivan, and this story happened about 2 years ago. A very close friend of mine went on a few dates with a girl, and I went to a party with them as well, and she was nice. Then things started getting weird after about 2 months. She started to morph him. He's a very quiet and not confrontational guy, so he let her. She made him dye his hair jet black and grow out a beard and dye that as well. Then I went almost a full year without seeing him. The next time I saw him, he was totally different. He talked like an old man and seemed like he had aged 40 years in a year. Keep in mind, we were 19 at the time. I became worried for him and thought he was being manipulated. I went to his apartment and rang the doorbell. I rang about 5 more times before someone answered. He invited me in for tea, which I thought was weird since he always hated hot drinks. I hung out for a while before asking to use the bathroom. As I went down the hallway, I noticed a room that I hadn't seen before. Out of curiosity, I went in and saw something that shocked me. A big red pentagram was in the center of the room, with candles in each corner of the shape. As I walked in, I didn't realize the door had shut behind me. I heard the door click and looked up to see my friend laughing. Not a happy, joy-filled laugh, but a low, hoarse, evil laugh. He ran towards me and wrapped his hands around my throat. He choked me to the ground. I was gasping. Shortly before suffocating, I picked up one of the burning candles and stuck the flame into his chest. He screamed and fell down, patting out the fire. I kicked him in the head several times and knocked him out. I heard a woman down the hallway scream and running towards the room. I kept the door closed using my whole body weight. She was banging on the door and screaming, "If you let go, I won't hurt you. I'll just use your soul to make him live forever." Well, by now, my friend began to wake back up. But when he looked at me, he didn't try to kill me. He just looked dazed. He looked around and saw me barely holding the door closed and began to help me. She managed to break down the door and flung both of us onto the floor. I skidded across the floor and part of my shirt wiped away the red paint. She screamed and began to sort of melt. We stood up, stunned, wondering what the hell happened. He changed and we both left to go to my apartment. He told me the whole story. Their relationship had been going well for a few months, but she then began asking him to do weird things, like going to Wiccan stores and purchase black candles. He didn't mind, so he got them. Then one night, he woke up to being in the middle of a pentagram, tied to the floor. She was saying something in some language he didn't know. He felt an excruciating pain in his chest, then woke up to see me holding the door. I did some research and I even took him to see an exorcist. The exorcist believed the witch was using him as a vessel to potentially transfer Satan into his body. He has since moved out of that apartment.
This is the difference between a pro and a noob in Lonely Survivor. A noob will run around with a low-level attack like the Icicle. They won't upgrade their weapons and will ultimately fail to defend against the attackers. Don't.
Hi, I'm Roseanne, and I have a cousin, Corey. He's 13 and used to sleepwalk a lot, and it's been quite a long time since he was sleepwalking, and this is what happened to him. One day, his parents decided to drop him off at me and my boyfriend Noah's apartment, since his parents have work somewhere far away, and his brothers have school. And that time, Corey was sick too, and we told him to rest. My boyfriend got a call from his grandma, and he told me we have to go. So I followed him since I had nothing to do. On my way home, I got a text from Corey that said, "Anne, come home now, please." When we arrived, we ran upstairs and we opened the door. We didn't see any sign of my cousin. We both search everywhere and find him inside the closet. His eyes were black, so my boyfriend kept calling his name and his eyes went back to normal. Then this is where he told us what happened. Before he went to sleep, he put his earphones and phone on his table, and then he went to sleep. He woke up because the hallway lights were on, and the first thing he felt was his earphone, and then he saw his phone on his stomach. The way he sleeps is he covers his face with the blanket, so that's why he can't see who's home or what happened. He was about to sit down, but he heard a woman's voice saying, "I'm gonna take him. He's not gonna come back. He's not gonna come back." Corey knew it wasn't my voice or his mother's voice, so he just stayed quiet. He also got the feeling of someone walking in the room and checking if he was asleep or not again and again. Something inside him kept telling him to close his eyes. But he realized his phone and earphones were not where he had put them. And that's when he felt something sitting on his bed and crawling on him. Corey closed his eyes shut and prayed while the thing lifted his blanket where his face was and laughed. He described the laugh as deep and echoing and slow. Corey said that it didn't scare him since it happened to him so many times. But this sleep paralysis was different, which shocked him. After what felt like hours, he quickly sat up and the lights were never on and the phone and earphones were never in his hand. He heard knocking on the wall and ran to our room and hid in our closet with his phone and earphones. That's when he texted me and calmed himself. We called my boyfriend's aunt's friend who knows about this kind of stuff. She told us that the thing was mad that my cousin stopped walking with them, where he was sleepwalking in real life. And they want to be friends with him. And that's why they want to take him forever. We didn't tell Corey about this, but nowadays we ask his 3 brothers to sleep in the same room with him so that the ghost doesn't take him away from us. Thank you for listening to this story. This happened this week on Wednesday, and an update, my cousin is doing okay. He just doesn't want to sleep early except if it's a school day. But the knocking sounds have never left him alone, and his brothers have never heard it.
I still remember the face of my friend dying in front of my eyes. Would that look be a resentment against me, an anger, or a sadness? I do not know the answer. I would never know forever. Sometimes the memory of that day portrays like a movie scene in my head, regardless of my will, and it feels like it is getting clearer as days go by. My psychiatrist told me that this was because of the shock, and he said he would conduct a hypnotherapy to erase my memory. In my unconscious, I imagine going back to that day to save my friend. However, despite repeating hundreds of times, I could not save him. It happened 8 years ago. This is a story of Ewan, a friend of mine who fell into a cult. He had believed in religion for a long time, but there was something off about it. Rumors say that people worship a very large snake as a god. I told him to not lie, but Ewan's face looked serious. He said everything went well after believing in that religion. One day, I couldn't resist his incessant invitation, so I followed him once. He was my best friend for 10 years, so I couldn't reject. What was the name of the religion? I couldn't remember, but one thing I do remember is that the name was not in modern language. I was shocked as soon as I entered the religion auditorium. Everyone was wearing a snake-faced mask, with their tongues sticking out. Their tongues were all split in the middle like a snake. But that day happened to be the day of an important ritual, which was the day of worship to the snake god. The cult leader came to the auditorium, and the believers frantically made the sound of snakes. I was shocked and got horrified to see Ewan was also hissing like crazy. A moment went by, and the believers gave something to the leader. Someone gave a snake-shaped gold. Someone else gave huge bundles of money, and someone even brought a deer that they had caught themselves. When it was Ewan's turn, I was confused because his hands were empty. However, when the leader stood in front of him, Ewan pushed me towards the leader. Full of shock and anger, I asked him what on earth he was doing. The leader, with an excited look, said to me, "Oh, such a precious gift. Do you also agree with being offered as a sacrifice to the snake god?" I cried out, "Never." Ewan started to persuade me. "You will get a huge reward if you give a part of your body to the snake god. Let's cut a little bit off of your thigh." I did it too. Ewan showed me his thigh, and his thighs were indeed cut. I shouted out, "Never." The leader suddenly became cold and stared at Ewan. He said quietly, "Then, Mr. Ewan does not have a sacrifice to offer today." Ewan's face became cold, and he started to tremble. He knelt down and begged me for permission. I did not want to do it, so I flatly refused. Then the leader shouted, "The snake god commands you to be punished." Then he dragged Ewan to take him somewhere. I followed him, yelling to let him go, but I couldn't help him because the believers stopped me. Ewan screamed and grappled, yet they did not let him go. They took him somewhere far away and reached a huge cage. And Inside the cage, there was a large snake coiled up that seemed to be more than 5 meters long. Ewan screamed, but the believers threw Ewan into the cage. In shock, I asked what they were doing, to which the leader replied, "The snake god will decide whether to punish him or to forgive him. We shall see his will." Soon after, the huge snake started to wind around Ewan's body. He screamed for help, and his eyes met mine. He looked at me and opened his mouth as if he was trying to tell me, but he couldn't speak. The snake was around his body completely, and I could hear a sound like crackling bones. I cried out and screamed, but I was kicked out by the believers. In such shock and horror, I called the police. The police arrived, but they were stopped by the leader and his believers. It took a while for the police to arrest them. When the police tried to find Ewan, he was nowhere to be found. However, the body of the snake was quite swollen. After the investigation, the police confirmed that Ewan was eaten by the snake. The leader and his believers were put in jail. It turned out that the leader actually fed not only Ewan, but also numerous people to the snake. I still cannot forget the eyes of dying Ewan, and I still have nightmares. In my nightmare, it is not Ewan, but me being winded up to death by the snake, and the feeling is so vivid as if it were real. Even today, my bed was soaked with my sweat, and the disgusting smell I felt in my dreams remained in my nose. When will this nightmare be over?
If you're wondering why I'm diving in,
It was a Thursday night when my boyfriend Gerard and I wanted to meet up at the park for a casual talk. We were neighbors, and our parents were really close friends. I was 15 at that time, and he was 19. Our parents didn't mind us dating, and they actually encouraged it, as we were meant for each other. My mum would go jogging with his mum, and my dad would go for drinks with his dad. On that Thursday night, I was walking up and down, waiting for him to come out of his house. We planned to meet up at 8, but at 8:10, he was nowhere to be seen. I began to call my neighbor, who lives opposite my house, to ask her what I should do. She couldn't pick up the phone as she was having tuition classes on. I was standing underneath the lamppost waiting for Gerard, and suddenly the lights went out. I got scared, so I sent lots of messages to him asking him to hurry. The lights went back on and I was scared like shit. I spammed Gerard again asking why he isn't out yet and telling him I was scared and I can't wait for him any longer. He replied back with a short text saying that we will be a bit late and he's putting on some cologne. I sighed in disbelief. The lights went off once again, but I was not scared of it anymore as I already felt so annoyed. Yes, it turned on again, but this time it was flickering. I looked closer to see a shabby old woman hanging on top of the lamppost. I freaked out, but I knew I had to get that lady down, as I thought she was my neighbor. I was wrong. "Excuse me, ma'am, I need to get you down right now," I said. She mumbled a few Chinese words, which I couldn't understand, and I replied with a, "huh?" She started screaming so loudly, and she was laughing like a maniac. She jumped down, and she was chasing me. I was crying and shouting for help as I saw her holding a sharp piece of glass. Luckily, my boyfriend came out and pulled me into his house, as he saw her too. She was banging her head on our window and mumbling the same Chinese words. I couldn't understand it, but I think my boyfriend did as he was Chinese. He pulled me upstairs, kissed me on the forehead, and told me to hide in the bathroom with him, as it was the only room with a lock. He called 911 and I was shaking violently as I was so freaked out. The woman managed to break into our house and she found us in the toilet. "Wo yao ni, si," she said. I screamed and my boyfriend covered my mouth. The door handle was shaking violently as she was trying to come in. The police arrived and they took her away. I found out she escaped from a mental asylum, and my boyfriend told me that she was saying something that she wants me to die. 2 years have passed and I'm going through therapy. My boyfriend moved out of town after that incident, and we broke up as we couldn't handle long-distance relationships. I am grateful to be alive.
My name is Louise M., and today is 11/9, the same day of this event. I'm an 18-year-old male teenager, and I live in a city called Belém, capital of a Brazilian state. English is not my first language, so pardon me if I make a mistake. At 4:53 a.m., I woke up. I was having a great dream and everything. Sad and angry, because I had to wake up at 5:50. I got to bed again and tried to force myself to sleep. But then, I heard something strange. I heard a noise coming from my window. It was a strange noise, like when you scratch an iron tool on a wall, or like someone sharpening a knife. Still, I found it weird because I live on the second floor of a house and couldn't be an animal, as the first thing I thought of was that. So I gathered the courage to find out what it was. In the corner of my window, there's a hole, so I decided to peek through it. I pulled my curtains only a bit, just enough to see through the hole. And then, my heart dropped as I saw a hand of a person holding onto the wall outside the house. When I pulled my curtains to peek, I made a little noise, and the scratching stopped. I got up and got out of my room. There's an old BB gun in the other bedroom of my house, so I got that, trying to make as little noise as possible. I made it to the bathroom and called my brother, who is a cop, as I live with my grandfathers and didn't want to wake them up. My brother said to check again and see if there was really someone there. From the other room of my house, you can see the window of my bedroom. So I opened up the other room's window, and I was relieved. I didn't see anyone. My heart started to slow down as I was filled with adrenaline before. I told my brother there was no one, and he went back to sleep. I still think about that. My brother told me it could be a spirit, as our family has a history with this supernatural thing. It could be true. It was dark, and because I just woke up, I could have imagined things. Still, there are 3 things that make me uncomfortable. Number 1, I'm not a person who wakes up lazy or sloth-like. I wake up ready because I used to train as soon as I awoke, as I'm an athlete. Number 2 is that I never heard a noise like that before. I can't describe it. It was like someone was trying to open the lock of the window with a knife or something metal. Number 3, it was very convenient that the noise stopped when I moved the curtain. Anyway, I think the scariest thing about this event today is that it wasn't clearly a ghost or anything unnatural. I was just afraid of why a person was breaking in my house, because sometimes it isn't just a robbery. There are bad and scary people in this world. I just thank God, because everything is fine now.
Okay,
But still, I wonder, what would have happened if I didn't wake up that